And we are live. Welcome to this week's episode of the Funvee Tailgate presented by ThunderblogSports.com. I, of course, am the G-Man, Jordy Cannell, and back on the pod after a week off for a little R&R is Matty D. What's up, buddy?
No guy. Well, it wasn't all right. I mean, it was relaxation, but it was 117 holes of just competition golf. You're fighting both yourself, your opponent, in this case, my brothers, and then the course itself. Down south golf, a lot flatter, but a lot more out of bounds. A lot more ways to get your golf balls in a lot of trouble. Let me tell you something.
Ooh, we might need on a future episode get a little course guide from Matty D.
Oh, definitely could help us out with that.
Yeah.
But one day we got to start previewing.
You invest in a drone and have you do like a golf channel type thing.
Yeah, a couple years ago, we were down there and there was a drone.
Really?
Flying? Yeah, it was wild.
Damn.
Like coming right. We were hitting golf balls. It was coming right over the top. I was hoping to see myself in some kind of pump up video. I have not seen that at this time, though, unfortunately.
Don't worry, we've filled a quota of us in pump up videos.
That's true.
For those that didn't see us in the Eagles one, Matty D and I popped up in it. Yeah. But we're here this week to talk college football. So to kind of give everybody a bit of housekeeping, we're a little time crunched this week, kind of like last week where Matt was away. I was having a weird week of work, ended up getting the pod up with Emily. This week we're both a little time crunched, so we're doing just college on this week's Funvee Tailgate podcast. Matt is going to get a blog post up for our cold hard locks, just like I did last week. And then I'm going to try to get the Funvee Tailgate blog actually up this week. Last week I ran out of time. This week I should have some time Friday morning. But yeah, so let's dive right in. Matt, the last 2 weeks, really last weekend, the chaos has begun.
Oh, I mean, we had talked and I basically guaranteed that, I gave you my 4 playoff teams and all of a sudden one of them is pretty much out. In my opinion, and just in general, I mean, when you looked at this weekend, the teams that lost this past weekend, it was incredible. Not only did teams lose, but Alabama, they actually had to punt twice in a game, which was pretty wild to watch as well. So,
but the odds on that were pretty long.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's more of a joke because they just continue to absolutely just dominate.
It's true.
But this is what college football is all about. This is what you're looking for here.
This is why you play the game.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it looks like a few teams have probably played their way out of the playoffs at this point. A few conferences have done the same. It's going to be a couple big weeks though coming up here as more and more teams play each other, big conference matchups. It's going to be exciting though, and I love it. I love that we're here. I love that there's chaos. I want more chaos. I'm rooting for teams to lose in this case. Yeah.
So kind of on that note, because you mentioned a couple conferences done, do you think it's time to tuck away the Big 12 and the Pac-12, or do you think there's a chance that one of those can stay alive?
Yeah, I would tell you that you can tuck away the Pac-12. We'll talk when we bring them up. Oregon did some good stuff, but Washington is out. Which is unfortunate because now Washington State, by the way, hosts their first ever college game day ever this week, which is pretty cool. But even at 5-1, it's going to take a miracle for them. Colorado got smoked by USC. That's going to affect their standing. So to me, I think the Pac-12 definitely. Now, I think Texas. Well, once again, Oklahoma and Texas appeared well. There's going to be a Big 12 championship game.
Yes.
Oklahoma, but I think even Texas needs some help. That being said, they could. So I don't want to count the Big 12 out. For me, Pac-12 out. Big 12, I'm not going to count it. I don't think it's right yet. I think there's still some potential there.
Yeah, there's 3 teams in the top 15 that are one-loss teams.
I would tell you that West Virginia's loss is crushing.
Yes.
Oklahoma running the table and they beat Texas, and their only loss is Texas on a neutral site. They're going to be back in the discussion. They did something else that's important. just like this is the same thing that Michigan did, same thing that LSU did, same thing that Florida did. They lost early.
Yes.
Like now you have a loss from here on out. This is where it's going to be tough because it's a what have you done for me lately poll. And so early losses tend to help you more than late losses, which I get makes sense, right? So I think that they're still in it as well. And no one's talking about them because they lost. But yeah. So regardless, though, this is what I was looking for. Enough of the boring, we already know who's going to be in kind of thing here.
No, that's a really good point because these teams, I'd even say Georgia lost at the right time too. You have to assume though they in order for their chances to stay alive, they have to stay undefeated and beat Alabama in the SEC championship. I think if they beat Auburn, if they beat LSU, I think maybe they have an argument, but they pretty much have to beat one of those two.
Yeah, well, Georgia needed to win out.
Yeah,
essentially, and they didn't. And
you don't think if they win, if they're 11-1 SEC champion, that they don't get in?
11-1 SEC champions, I do think they get in. I do because they'll have beaten Alabama. That's why. Yeah.
What about if it's LSU? I think that's tough.
If LSU wins out,
if LSU is the West champion, say they beat Alabama and they're an 11-1, and then they lose to Georgia. I think Georgia might get in just because it's the SEC and for that luster.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say a couple things. Right now, Clemson, assuming they beat NC State this weekend and they end up beating whoever they play, whether it's Miami or somebody else. Miami, though, we'll get to. They're probably a lock because you'd assume they're going to win out. And then let's make the assumption that Michigan and Ohio State meet end of the year. Ohio State undefeated, Michigan with one loss. The winner of that game goes to the Big Ten championship, should beat Wisconsin, who's clearly not as great, and we'll talk about the game. But I think the problem is Notre Dame is the wrench. I don't know how I don't know how the SEC champ doesn't get in. So even a 2-loss LSU, I guess my point is I just don't see how an SEC champ isn't in. But Notre Dame takes away the SEC number 2 because the assumption was Alabama, Georgia, right? They both meet undefeated in the title game. One team loses, but they both get in the playoff, which would work right now if Notre Dame wasn't ranked 4th and undefeated.
Yep.
That's so they kind of throw the wrench in the whole thing, I think. So unless they figure out a way to lose a game here, which they keep trying to do, and other teams just don't want to take it from them, which would be great if somebody would do that.
Pretty crazy. They've gotten close a number of times. And then when you think they're out, they demolish their next opponent.
Yeah, by the way, let's talk about real quick. They play at Northwestern in 2 weeks. Navy, by the way, isn't a guarantee because they're a good football program. But Northwestern is leading the Big 12
Big 10.
Big 10. What division are they? Big 10
West.
They're leading the Big Ten West right now, and that team's always a tough out. We saw Michigan struggle with them. They've beaten some good teams this year. And by the way, they play at USC last game of the season. USC is getting better. We just saw them smoke Colorado, who was ranked pretty high. So to me, there's some interesting storylines there for Notre Dame moving forward in this case.
Yeah.
But,
One thing that helps them too, one of their only home losses is to Duke. And Duke, you don't really hear a ton about because they were ranked for a hot second. And because they're only now they're 1-1, but they were 0-1, so they were in last place in the Coastal. They're 5-1 team, and they have the 3rd best record in the division or in the conference. Yeah. I mean, that helps the Northwestern, sort of a second degree, but it helps out with that resume in terms of beating them at home for a Notre Dame, for Michigan, for a lot of different teams, and especially if they end up making some sort of run to an ACC championship or close to it, a lot of different things. That sort of extra degrees could be the difference maker in who gets in as the 4th, maybe even as the 3rd seed in the college football playoff.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. That's a great point to bring up there as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is a real tinfoil hat season, or at least it's starting to seem that way.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. 100%. I think a couple other potential It's gonna be it's gonna be really fascinating here to me. Clemson has got a big game this week.
Yes.
Yeah, they finally get a real big time test because NC State they've got a great offensive line. They're not a team to sleep on, if you will. Because right now, and this is not necessarily Clemson's fault, but their best win, and it was a great win, but it was close, is at Texas A&M.
That's true.
And Texas A&M is fantastic, and that's kind of it. Because they got FSU is not the same. Louisville's not the same.
Syracuse is probably their next best win.
I guess. No, I mean, look, like we talked about, they're going to have. I mean, they're going to play Duke. They're going to play South Carolina, but FSU, Louisville, Boston College, not what we expected. Duke, good enough that it's going to be a challenge, but it's at Clemson, and they play at South Carolina comes to visit. So they lose to NC State. I don't see how they make the playoff unless a bunch of other teams lose. That's what I would say on it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, the ACC is going to be this inflection point as to if NC State wins this game, where do they go from here? If Clemson's a one-loss team and kind of figuring out where they are. Because think about it. They finished their schedule. You mentioned Florida State and you mentioned not Florida State. You mentioned their game against South Carolina at the end of the year. They finished their schedule earlier than the rest of the conference. So there's a lot of things that would be up in the air if they were to lose this game. And it's definitely not a game to sleep on because NC State is a really good air attack. You mentioned their offensive line, so it's going to be a really good test for their defensive line, Clemson's. Mm-hmm. And we're really going to see a pretty good game, I think. And NC State's defense isn't really anything to sleep on. Granted, they were supposed to play West Virginia, which would have been a really good indicator of what we could see in this game, and that got canceled because of the hurricane. But I think this is a really good opportunity.
That hurts NC State a little bit because if they were to somehow get past Clemson this week, and that's a very tall task, it's at Clemson. Yeah. If they get past them, they look pretty locked to win out just because they're a good. They don't.
Then they're an 11-0 team, not 12-0. That's the only issue.
Right. I would just tell you though. My only thought with them is they might beat Clemson and then drop a game here, just somewhere because they're not necessarily a power program. A one-loss NC State team. They beat Clemson, but they still lose. I still don't think they get in. I still think somebody else will get in from another major conference, which is why we've been talking about after Miami struggles. Clemson's it's really a one-team ACC race for the playoff. Like that's the way I looked at it.
And that's the one thing I was about to ask you. Do you think
they don't have the pedigree? So,
do you think if NC State were to say win out, they beat Clemson, they end up being the ACC champion? Even as a 12-0 team, 11 regular season, 12th win as the ACC champion, do you think that Clemson could get in as an 11-1 team because Clemson? Or do you think that they would just leave the ACC out?
I would tell you what they should do is they should leave let's make the assumption Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame finish 1, 2, and 3, right?
Okay.
And then your
Big 12 champion in?
That's what I'm saying. I think you'd have to go Big 12 there simply because I think an Oklahoma is going to have a stronger resume. I think a Texas is going to have a stronger,
West Virginia,
even West Virginia, right? So I would argue that if you don't to not make your title game, I know that happened, but in a weak ACC, it's not like you're the SEC and you're playing a ranked opponent every week. Or even the Big 12, you're playing a lot of ranked opponents. I think that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I did want to bring up what I think is this LSU Tigers team.
Go Tiger!
They just have a brutal schedule, by the way.
Oh yeah.
And so it's a shame because they beat.
That's a big boy schedule.
They beat Auburn. All right. They lost to Florida. They bounced back with a huge win against Georgia last week. Now they have Mississippi State coming to town, 22nd ranked, not an easy out. And then, by the way, next week they play Alabama. Yep. Let's say they beat Alabama, which I don't think they will. They still would have to go to Texas A&M to end the year. That's the last thing I said. You want to talk about a brutal schedule for LSU. I mean, team, that's tough.
Even at Arkansas is not an easy win.
No, I know. I mean, you
Arkansas
can't.
not
Arkansas
good,
but it's still an SEC road game. And by the
road
way,
game in division.
And so that's after they play Alabama. That's called a letdown potential right there.
You know what their the rivalry trophy is for the LSU Arkansas game?
No.
Called the Golden Boot. Because if you look at Louisiana and Arkansas, it looks like a big boot.
That's
I knew that from NCAA football back in the day. I think I had to be a pro or be a college player that was nice. I think a quarterback for Arkansas, something like that.
Yeah,
I remember that trophy because it's an interesting one.
Right.
And Jewel Shillelagh, USC Notre Dame, the Golden Boot for Arkansas and LSU.
I dig that.
No, I agree though. I mean, this weekend's going to be a real. You almost have to think after such a shellacking that they gave Georgia. You almost have to think LSU is going to have some sort of moment this week, especially with Alabama coming to town next week, that there could be a bit of a slow start. I'm not sure the best way to put it. Offensively, you almost have to think they put up 36 last week, they put up 19 the week before, 45 3 weeks ago against Ole Miss. You have to wonder what offense are we going to see in this game, because they're good at home offensively, but defensively is really where they come into play. So I don't know. I have a feeling it's going to be a really low scoring game. I think they pull it out, but it's a 6.5 point line. And I think that's a really interesting number.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. I gotta tell you, they're just a battle. That team is just it's just I think it's just a I kind of feel bad for them in that regard. Like, I feel like they're a really good football team. By the way, they have a great corner, best name in football. Greedy. We talk about him, Greedy Williams, 6'3".
Yes.
He's got great defense. They got Devin White as a linebacker. When you watch LSU, circle number 40 on the defense, side-to-side linebacker. He's so effective that Georgia, they did a 5-play sequence where Georgia was running the football. Every play, they double teamed him with 2 linemen. That's how good White is as a linebacker. That LSU team is loaded with talent, in particular on the defensive side of the ball. It's a tall task to ask them to go and beat Alabama.
It really is.
And on top of already, like, literally, they're going 4 ranked teams in a row. Only positive is it is in Death Valley. You have to assuming they win this week, both teams win this week, it'll be Alabama LSU game day. In Death Valley.
I don't think it would be anyway. That's an unreal atmosphere.
Yeah, but I don't want to skip. They cannot look ahead. Mississippi State struggled early, but this team, Mississippi State, has a great quarterback. We talked about how they could be a dark horse. They honestly, and I know Auburn's got some problems, but they smoked Auburn. So do not sleep on this Mississippi State game. And this is the one problem that normally it's the one thing that Alabama's been able to do is the SEC teams shred each other because they're so talented. Alabama seems to come out of that. But yeah, this is going to be It's going to be wild in that regard. Yeah, I was actually shocked by LSU's because it was such an easy victory over Georgia. I was definitely surprised there. 36.
Kind of like last year when Georgia lost to Auburn. Remember how they just kind of laid down?
Yeah.
They got rolled over by Auburn and then came back in the SEC championship and killed them.
Yeah, Georgia's got to run the table. I mean, as talented as they are, they play Florida this week. They're at Kentucky in 2 weeks, and they play Auburn. The space of the next 3 weeks, if they win the next 3 weeks, they're going to be a 1-loss team. And it's basically this game, them and Florida, the next 2 weeks, if they beat Florida and Kentucky, they're probably
they play Florida next week.
Are they going to bye this week? They're on a bye this week.
Yeah, they're on a bye this week. Florida's next week.
So they play Florida and they play at Kentucky. Those 2 games are going to decide if they're going to be in the championship game.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a big game. It's the next 2 weeks, next 3 weeks for after the bye week. Next 3 weeks for Georgia's important. They're still super talented. They definitely can make that happen. In my opinion. But
no, they absolutely can. I mean, I think next week it's a neutral site game, world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville. So really, don't sleep on that game because We saw what happened to LSU going down into Florida.
Yeah.
Same thing could happen to Georgia. I mean, Florida's defense is for real.
Yeah, I want to wave. I want to wave goodbye to some teams whose playoff hopes were dashed this past week.
Yes. Yeah. That's a really good call.
Let's wave goodbye to. Well, first of all, let's wave hello to the team that we talk every week. How this team is going to upset somebody. Iowa State did it.
Yep. Yeah.
30-14 over.
We've said this every single time they play a ranked opponent, and it finally happened.
They're going to upset somebody. I know. David Montgomery, Iowa State running back, 189 yards on the ground. He's battling with like Jonathan Taylor and a couple other guys for best college running back in college football. That's how good he's been. I would say Travis Etienne of Clemson, Jonathan Taylor, but you got to put Montgomery up there. He's not talked about because he's not on the same caliber team. But you got to wave goodbye. We maybe West Virginia can still do it, but I'm kind of giving them the Queen wave in terms of their playoff hopes, just because it's a tough loss.
I'd say the Big 12 is 1 foot out the door right now.
Yeah, they're going to have, because of that canceled game against a ranked NC State, it makes this more difficult.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, that is a really good point.
They have to still play Texas, TCU, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma still. So that's going to be a tough road for them anyway. We knew they were kind of a backloaded schedule, so this one is
in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we can wave goodbye to Washington's playoff hopes, which I think is tough for the Pac-12 because they look like the most complete team. But Oregon showed up. I got to tell you, Herbert's making his case for the number 1 overall pick. He's been so good this year. Yeah, I think so. I think Locke's going to battle him there, the Missouri guy. But
does it depend on who? Not to get too deep into the weeds of NFL draft stuff. Do you think it depends on who's picking?
I do a little bit, yeah. A lot of people are chewing the Giants.
Maybe make a case for Bosa, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure. But
I think it depends on who ends up being the worst team, right? If it's a team that took a quarterback this year, if it's the Cardinals or somebody like that drafted a quarterback, that's going to be tough.
If it's the Giants, they're taking a QB.
Giants definitely make a lot. Yeah, the Giants make a ton of sense with that first overall pick. There. And I think Fitz is important too. I think a lot of teams are going to Drew Lock. A lot of scouts like him, and he's not as much of I don't want to call him a 1-year wonder, but for example, Indianapolis, if they're going to be a high pick, Oakland, Atlanta, Arizona, San Francisco, they're probably not taking a quarterback. By the way, if I'm one of those top 5 teams and I don't need a QB, knowing my God, you could just haul it up. I mean, there's going to be and there's always going to be another quarterback who flies up lists too. Yeah. So watch out for that. I mean, but the 3 pretty much lock first round picks are Locke, Greer, and Herbert from Oregon. Those are your lock. But there's always a 4th. Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State's a guy.
You think Herbert, just coming back into the conversation of Pac-12, do you think he's just put himself into the Heisman category, top 3, or do you still think
that's a good? Yeah, I mean that's a good.
Fringe top 3.
I think he's fringe. I think his team would have to win out for him to have any chance.
Yeah, they got to be Pac-12 champs.
Yeah, I think they have to be Pac-12 champs for him to get there. I mean, it's definitely dominated now because of Jonathan Taylor.
Stanford loss hurts.
And yes, I do. I think the Stanford. But Jonathan Taylor and Bryce Love. Taylor's been great, but his team's been not as good. And then Bryce Love has been really terrible, to be honest. Those 2 losses make the Heisman race very QB focused. I'll tell you, everyone, and I get it. Everyone wants Tua at the top, but his statistics aren't going to speak because he's not playing as much in these blowouts. He's got a lot of touchdowns and no picks, and his advanced statistics are incredible, and his team's really good. But I got to tell you, it's the most valuable player in college football. He arguably might not play this week because of his injury. Yeah. Jalen Hurts is going to step in, and that team's not going to miss a beat.
Exactly.
To an extent. So that's something to look at, which is why a guy like Herbert
might. To an extent. I see what you did.
Yeah, I like that. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much on that, but I definitely think that Dwayne Haskins is definitely on the top of that heap too. I hate to give him the credit he deserves, but he deserves that credit because he's been incredible. So we'll see what happens. But There's a lot of really good players. I think Greer kind of played himself out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, he might. I mean, granted, it's mid-October, so there's plenty of time.
Oh, it is mid-October.
Plenty of time.
You're starting to see that top crew kind of change themselves.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think Herbert's now he's
all over again.
Yeah, he's definitely in the conversation though. Herbert in this case. I would tell you the guy that we're not going to get any press but should is Mackenzie Milton, the UCF quarterback who pulled one out against a good Memphis program. He's really good in this case. But
is he a Jordan Lynch upside? He gets invited to New York, but kind of just there.
Yeah.
No,
I think he did. I like that idea of him being like that third invitation. Yeah, no, I definitely do. The other guy to keep an eye on, because once again, they're lost. We're not talking about, but Kyler Murray is putting up video game stats. So he's another guy who we might see after a couple big weeks kind of get back in the conversation. But I actually think it's a two-man race between Tua and Haskins right now. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to kind of wrap up the Pac-12 before we move to to our favorite conference. Yeah, I think it's time to tuck them away, put them to bed. Aside from really maybe Oregon, you kind of need Stanford to right the ship for them. Maybe Washington State. That's really about it. I don't think Colorado, if they win out, would be a good opportunity like to have a real shot at the playoff. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. They got thrashed. Yeah, I think they're out. That's why I'm shutting the door on the Pac-12.
Yeah, the Pac-12 runs into this every year. They just beat each other up, and it's
Look, they're deep. They're a deep conference. We talked about it when we were previewing them. But they just because of their location, because they don't get the same press, because their games are late. We don't know the quality of the Pac-12 as much as we should. Yeah.
No, I would agree with that totally.
Yeah. No, let's. Right. But you want to jump in? I'm assuming to a conference that made some statements, but also lost a team this week as well, most likely. Yes. Which hurt. Two teams. They lost 2 teams this week.
The conference that a lot of people were putting to bed at the end of September. And now they've at least emerged with 2 really hopeful teams. Obviously, both are in the top 10. But you're right. Let's start with the teams they lost. Wisconsin played themselves out, getting smoked by Michigan.
Yeah.
And Penn State
go ahead. Go.
Penn State with the unlikely loss, but let's start with Wisconsin.
What I was going to say with Wisconsin is they played themselves out of the playoff, not a New Year's Day 6 bowl though, because they're just you would assume they're going to figure out a way to still win and have a chance at the title game.
Yeah.
Their only really difficult matchup they do go to Penn State, which you thought before Penn State's shocking loss that could be a trap game for them.
Well, they have to go to Northwestern next week.
Right, which is pretty much – I mean, so here's the thing, though. They're 2-1 in the conference.
Yep.
They did beat Iowa, which is a huge head-to-head because Iowa is ranked and pretty good.
Yep.
But it's really that Northwestern game. If they win that game, they're not losing to Illinois. They're not losing to Rutgers.
Purdue might be tough.
At Purdue, Minnesota, they're okay teams, but I would.
Well, Minnesota's a rivalry game, so that's kind of a toss-up almost. I mean, Minnesota's not that good, but
yeah, if they beat Northwestern, even if they lose to Penn State, if they beat Northwestern, they're probably in the championship game. Because remember, Northwestern's got to play Notre Dame, and they got to go to Iowa. So, and I hope. By the way, I hope Northwestern
Notre Dame
the title
game.
That would be great.
Them going to the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. I forgot about that. But the at Iowa game is going to be really tough in early November there. Yeah. So, But so those 2 teams played. Penn State, I was shocked. Yeah. I even said it. I mean, we were watching the game live, and the Michigan State wide receiver had been blowing him up pretty much all game, and it was single hike. It was single coverage. The safety rolled the other way, and the corner was playing bump and run coverage. It was dumb. I mean, it was dumb. It was a dumb decision by the coordinator to put his corner in that position. And it was shocking though at home, because Penn State was basically saying, "Look, we lost to Ohio State. We would have a chance if we went out, with some great wins, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, that we might be in the conversation to be kind of a quote unquote at-large bid to the playoff." If something were to happen.
You'd think too, Michigan State loses pretty handily to Northwestern at home, and you think, all right, now they have to go to this good Penn State team. You would have, I mean, it's a weird game because it's Big Ten East, but
yeah,
you would have thought that Penn State would just demolish these guys because they only beat Central Michigan. Michigan State did by 11 points. They barely got away with a 2-touchdown win at Indiana after coming back from the loss against Arizona State. I mean, I've been ready to put these guys to bed so many different times, Michigan State, and Sparty steps up. I mean, this weekend they're playing Michigan, which you cannot sleep on any accord. Michigan, as we've determined, America's slow start team.
That's true.
But also America's second half team.
That's true. Yep. Well, their defense really turns it on. I want to make sure we got to make sure before we jump into this week's matchups, and we can talk about Michigan, Ohio State here in a second. We got to also wave goodbye. I waved goodbye to Colorado. I think they're out.
Yeah.
I'm waving goodbye to Miami. You can't lose to Virginia.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you cannot lose to Virginia.
I think any last gasp Auburn chance was definitely ruined against Tennessee. That team appears to be in free fall.
Yeah, I forgot that happened. I forgot that was last week.
Yeah. So, once again, 30-24. Auburn, what are you doing?
You know what this makes me think, though? That the Iron Bowl is going to be way closer than we're now thinking.
Oh, yeah. This is exactly
the Iron Bowl is going to be this.
Oh, yeah.
It's like remember the Cam Newton year, Alabama is like the one year in the Nick Saban dynasty that Alabama was a non-factor, and Alabama was killing Cam Newton, and Cam Newton had to come back from like a 3-touchdown deficit. It's like that kind of a year I'm feeling like.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. Once again, they play Ole Miss, then they go Texas A&M at Georgia, and they end the season, like you said, in the Iron Bowl. And they still have a ton of tough games, but they can climb themselves back into ranked, but 4-3 with losses. LSU and Mississippi State, you kind of get, although Mississippi State 23-9. Tennessee is an inexcusable loss this year. For that program. No. So we waved goodbye to a lot of teams, but we waved hello to a couple teams, including the Michigan Wolverines, our guys getting back involved in the playoff picture with a commanding victory against that Wisconsin program. We knew their defense was going to be great, but we saw some of the changes offensively for them, more of a spread out offense, still with a power aspect to it, but they spread it out a little more. They let Shea Patterson use his legs. This is going to be something that's going to be critical to their success against Michigan State and Penn State. But even more importantly, I don't want to look too far ahead, but assuming they figure out a way, it's going to be tough to win these next two games. That matchup against Ohio State, the one weakness Ohio State's had is giving up big plays in the passing game. They give up a ton of big plays. It's kept teams in games against them. Michigan's going to need to have that passing game because even with Nick Bosa's stepping away from school because of his injury, even with him out, this team still is loaded on the defensive front. So
don't think that this is going to be Ohio State.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're in disarray. When was the last time he played? TCU a month ago.
TCU game. He's played weeks ago. Yeah. So definitely don't get but it's going to be a huge game this week. Going to going to Michigan State. Harbaugh has a big win last week.
Has Harbaugh beaten Michigan State yet?
I think he has once.
He's 1-2.
But obviously, he lost on the punt a couple years ago, and he lost last year, I believe, as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. 2 years ago, they won.
Yeah.
So he's undefeated at Michigan State.
Yeah, I know, right? So here's the thing. Michigan State's got a great quarterback, a great college quarterback in the work. He's a senior, I believe. Ton of experience. He's a junior, excuse me, but ton of experience. Guy can play. This Michigan defense has to hold early, but more importantly, I think Michigan's got to score early in this game.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think if it's close and Michigan State's hanging around at halftime, I think that second half doesn't become what we've become accustomed to of Michigan, where the Wolverines really start to pull it ahead and cover the spread, and the defense really tightens it up. I think it gets to be a little more worrisome.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. They need to score early.
Yeah.
And get it going. They just need to feed the ground game. They need to let Shea Patterson run. They just need to keep it rolling.
What that Michigan defense did against Alex Hornibrook, who people don't know enough about, because that guy, not a statistics guy, but he's one of the best road quarterbacks almost
he's
ever.
A solid QB.
Football. Yeah, they made him look like a freshman with no idea what he was doing. Defense needs to bring that same kind of pressure against this Michigan State team. This is a true rivalry game. Michigan wins this game, and that Penn State comes to visit, they'll be ready. And that's gonna be a big game next week. I mean, it's not an easy road for Michigan, but they can do it. They definitely can do it. Oklahoma gets back on the road against TCU. I think that's an important game. TCU really struggled since that loss, to Ohio State, which we were hoping wasn't going to be the case. They've dropped games against Texas and against Texas Tech. Not like they're bad opponents, but I don't want to call it a trap game, but Oklahoma better come ready to play.
I agree. I totally agree.
By the way, go ahead.
I was gonna make a joke and say big battle for a potential coastal division champions. Virginia going to Duke this weekend.
I know, right? Who would have thought that?
Real big opponent. Granted, right? both teams are Duke could become bowl eligible with a win, and Virginia's 4-2, so don't sleep on that.
Yeah, I'm with you. By the way, let's talk. There's not we talk about Michigan State. Michigan State. That's a big game. We'd already discussed NC State and Clemson. We talked about Mississippi State and LSU. And when but there's another big game that's kind of right in our backyard we could go to. By the way, I mean, Cincinnati, undefeated Cincinnati playing our Temple Owls at the Lake this Saturday. Yeah, so Cincinnati.
Bigger game. I was going to ask, bigger game, Cincy Temple or Eagles Panthers?
No, Eagles Panthers.
I know.
Anyway,
to fuck with you.
Don't ruin it. No, it's fine. No, it's a fun game. The other game I wanted to highlight here, we talked about it a little bit. Washington State, Oregon. Washington State is favored by 3, by the way. Yeah.
I mean, they're a good home team.
Yeah.
Solid QB with Gardner Minshew.
Only
I mean, I think
they didn't really play anybody.
Special there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it will definitely be high scoring. Going to be a fun game to watch. Definitely thinking about tuning into that one.
Yeah.
In this case, but once again, I think nobody's locking their spot in this week. But if LSU loses, they're out of the discussion. If Michigan loses, they're out of the discussion. And obviously we talked about the potential ramifications of Clemson NC State, although Clemson is a 17.5-point favorite. But you know what? Ryan Finley is a veteran quarterback. They've got a great offensive line there for NC State. Kelvin Harmon is an excellent wide receiver. It's a great game to watch to get to know this team because the problem is we don't watch yet. So if you want to tune in and learn a little bit about them, by the way, if they win, you're going to learn a lot about them. But I don't bet on college football. But I would take the under in college football on this game. I think it's going to be closer than 17.5, even though NC State's on the road.
So you're saying take NC State points, not the total.
Yeah, I can't pick them to win. I can't. I just think with Trevor Lawrence healthy, Clemson is still so talented.
Degenerates, to be clear, Matt is taking NC State plus 17, not the under 56 points.
No, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm taking that. I think might be over.
Confused degenerates like me, man. I live for that stuff.
Great week, though. Should be a great week.
Great week. Quick shout out to our Lehigh Mountain Hawks. They're looking for their first Patriot League win. They're at Georgetown this week.
Come on, boys.
They need it, man. They lost to Fordham last week. Rough loss.
We'll be enjoying when we get back together and kind of talk about next week, week 9. Some really good matchups coming up. Can't wait to preview those with you. College football's getting intense. It's getting intense.
Hopefully, if my week isn't crazy next week, hopefully I can maybe make an appearance at the Matty D house. And
that'd be fine. Come by. That'd be good. I like that idea. I love that idea.
Yeah. We'll discuss as the week goes on. Nice. I got to go to New Jersey for a wedding. That's part of my wacky week this week. But yeah, keep an eye out kind of for the rest of the week for Matt's Cold Hard Locks, the blog post going back to old school. Then my Funvee Tailgate blog. Jesus, that's a tongue twister. That shouldn't be. And any other blogs that we have, thunderblogsports.com, ThunderBLG on Twitter, Thunderblog Sports on Instagram. Maddie D and I are going to try to get out an Instagram a day because we are trying to expand that. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us, Matt. Thank you as always. This was a ton of fun. I'm glad we got our thoughts out onto the pod.
Oh, and by the way, if you didn't know, I am picking the Eagles to win this week.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it's a big week. Although Panthers' third straight NFC East game, going to be interesting. But I agree. Anyway, that's going to do it for us. We got to roll. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend, everybody. Go Birds, go Blue, and go Lehigh.